Good evening and welcome to Writers on Writing. I'm your host, Dr. Brenda Greene, and we are in the studios of Medgar Evers College over the airways of WNYE 91.5 FM. Writers on Writing comes to you every Sunday and gives you, our listening audience, to hear writers from the African diaspora talk about their work, their lives, and their craft. I'm very pleased to have with me in the studio today two people. You've heard her before, April Silver and Aaron Lloyd. Welcome, April and Aaron.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Okay. April, as I said, is a longtime friend to Medgar Evers College and the Center for Black Literature. She is the social entrepreneur and activist, a writer, and founder of Akili Worksongs. She was the founding president of the Cultural Initiative and creative producer of the country's first hip-hop conference back at Howard University.
Yes.
This helped to birth the hip-hop education movement. She is also a former television talk show host of My Two Cents, and she has had her work praised and cited in Essence, Ms., Ebony, Newsweek, The Washington Post, CNN, and other international media. April is the editor of a new book, a very important book, Be a Father to Your Child. Real talk from Black men on family, love, and fatherhood. And this was a very, very important task. I'm also pleased to have in the studio Aaron Lloyd. Aaron Lloyd is one of the contributing writers to this magnificent and important anthology. He's a freelance writer, screenwriter, and filmmaker. He has written about hip-hop music artists for over a decade, including Left Eye of TLC and A Tribe Called Quest. His articles have appeared in Rap Pages, Vibe.com, and other outlets. He is about to write, produce, and release his debut film, a 45-minute short, in 2008. Aaron was also a founding and executive board member of Black Nia Force, a community and cultural organization, and was co-owner of the writing service company Scribble Scrabble Entertainment. So, again, welcome to you, Aaron.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Let's talk about this really, really important book. I was saying to you, April, that really what moved me is the range of people who you have contributing to this book, who are from the Generation X, as you said, Generation X, journalists, educators, activists, filmmakers, public intellectuals. You have really a range of people, and I call them the 30-something crowd, and you call, and actually all of you are now approaching upper 30s, 40, right?
Yeah,
40. Okay, yes. But the Generation X, which you, as you define, and others, those who came of age from 1965, between 1965, who were born between 1965 and 1989. So tell us a little bit about some of the people in the book and how you came to write this, to edit this anthology.
Sure. I want to first say that this was a vision that I was asked to pilot. This was a craft that I was asked to pilot. This is actually the idea of Lauren Harris, who's a program officer at the Ford Foundation, and he's been doing wonderful fatherhood-based policy work for a number of years. So he and I, at his invitation, have been working on this topic since 1999, actually. So it was his vision to have a book, a product in the marketplace that talked about fatherhood and family building and responsible fatherhood in particular, in a way that was digestible, in a way that was not necessarily scholarly or academic, and that has its place, but he certainly wanted to see a product that was portable on the subway. So that was his vision, and he knocked on the door, figuratively speaking, and said if I would do this, and I was more than honored. So with that charge, my responsibility was to pull together who I thought would be a great voice for this, and the specific charge was Black men who came of age, like you said, this Generation X, and who was influenced mostly by hip hop.
Right.
So that's particular to this book. And so the reason for that is because we were supposed to be the generation that was doomed. The highest joblessness rate, fatherlessness at an all-time high compared to previous generations, crack, just penetrated our communities in such ways we were the endangered species. So his notion, which I totally agree with, is that that's not fully true. It doesn't fully say who we are as a community and particularly as black men. So how do we talk about that? So that's how the project came to me, and it took 2 years.
Right. I can understand that.
Yeah.
I mean, you have some of the people you have, including Aaron. Who are some of the people you have that contributed to this?
Yeah,
because that was, as I said, that was really very impressive to me. Is the range of people and looking at what people of your generation are doing.
Yeah, it's everyone for some more popular names who have been on this show, for example, would be Mo Beasley, one of our favorite poets. We have Kevin Powell, a writer, activist from Brooklyn as well. Byron Hurt, the filmmaker and anti-sexist activist. He did the film Beyond Beats and Rhyme. Jelani Cobb, yes, who's another friend from Howard University. He's a professor.
How many people from Howard are in this book?
Yeah, but no, I made sure it was balanced out. But Davy D from the West Coast, famous, well-respected historian.
Rhymefest.
Yeah, the
MC rapper.
The Grammy Award-winning rapper, Rhymefest, exactly. Bill Stephanie, oh my gosh.
Yes.
He's one of the, not only is he a veteran music industry executive, but he's been at the forefront on fatherhood issues and black family issues for a number of years.
And very important to hip-hop also.
Yeah.
Public Enemy, Def
Right.
Jam, very important, man,
Yeah.
in the hip-hop world.
Yeah, first president of Def Jam, actually.
Yes.
What's his name?
Bill
Stephanie.
Stephanie.
Bill Stephanie.
Yeah.
Okay.
But also, I think it's interesting to note that we had some first-time writers. Sean Neblett from Harlem. Well, he's a playwright,
Right.
but had not been published before. We had Dion Chavis from Virginia, but he had never written before. He's a radio personality, but ironically enough, one of the easiest essays to edit. Powerful story, but had never really written before. And Lasana Hotep at Arizona State.
Right. So
University.
what were the criteria other than Generation X and the guiding theme of hip hop? What were the criteria for bringing
and this is different
these
from
writers together?
I'm sorry. Yeah. We didn't do an open call like some anthologies. They have the open call.
Invitation only, huh?
Right, yeah. Honestly, it really was. It was honestly who I felt was going to really articulate this. And my job was to make sure that it was national in scope, that it was cross-country. So we have people from every region. Granted, we are a little New York heavy, I'll say that. But we have people from every region. It didn't matter that you didn't have to be quote unquote famous or known in the academic or hip hop circle, but the story had to be compelling. Now, originally we were supposed to have so many more people in this book, but this
Yes.
fully well. You can be a great writer, but if you can't meet deadlines,
Yes.
it doesn't work.
Right. I'm sure you also know about deadlines.
Oh, yes, yes. Writers are well known to break deadlines, but the thing that I think that April did is she managed to have a cross-section of writers that had a different story. Each writer had a different story. Mm-hmm. Some things overlap, but she managed to have a cross-section of men that covered the issue of fatherhood completely, from the good, the bad, and the ugly. So often we hear about fatherhood from the aspect of we're absentee fathers.
Right.
And that is a very important, compelling issue in our community. But that's not the complete story.
Right.
There are black men who are wonderful fathers who are struggling to become fathers because their father was absent in their lives and they're figuring it out. And what April, I think, did in a masterful way is find a very good cross-section of voices and stories also, which I think is one of the most important aspects, because the anthology covers the issue of fatherhood with only 24 men rather well.
Yeah, I agree, and I think what was the other compelling aspect of this book is the stories, the voice. The voices are so loud and clear. I feel like as if they're talking to me. It's not, as you said, you wanted it in a language that was accessible. It's not academese. It's real. It's for real. It's Be a Father, real talk, as she said,
Yes.
from black men on family love and fatherhood. Why don't we, that's a good segue, why don't you share with us this kind of story that you told and what your background is? What are the relationships you had with your father and the challenges?
My father and mother were rather quickly were married, and I was born in the summer, and they got married in December. They stayed together for approximately 3 years and separated. And although they never divorced, they stayed separated for maybe 15, 16 years.
That happens a lot
Yeah.
in the black community.
Yeah, especially in the 70s. And I think when you're young and you're poor, and divorce costs money, you just kind of go your separate ways. And I didn't see my father for over a decade. So my story is a story of a very familiar story of an absentee father. But I wanted to write a story of redemption, which is the truth of my particular situation. And I think so many black men are angry about not having their father in their lives. And I experienced that anger myself. But I do believe that anger is self-defeating. And I wanted to tell the story of how losing that anger, or that anger dissipating, actually freed me and allowed me to actually move on. Although I didn't realize it, I was emotionally stuck in the anger of not having my father in my life. So I was actually lucky that my father came into my life as a teenager. And even when he came back into my life, he wasn't an ideal father. And we had many issues and many growing pains and problems. And he failed me in person, which was almost more painful than him failing me when he wasn't there. Because as a kid, you only know what you know. And if he's not there, you kind of get used to that. So my story is a story of redemption, of the healing and letting go of the anger.
Well, it appears a story of also maturing and growing up and what you learn in terms of what real fathers and real sons do.
Yes.
And so you talked about reaching a turning point. And I'm sure there are many people out there who are very angry or frustrated or disappointed in their fathers. What can one do to move on so that you don't become emotionally stuck?
I think that you have to realize that you only can control the things that are within yourself. You really can't control the fact that your father isn't there or that he's a poor father. You can control how you respond to those situations. You can control how you feel about those situations. And I think it comes down to understanding that the power is within you. So often you may feel like the power is within my father. I'm waiting for him to come back. I'm waiting for him to be a good father.
Right.
And that's not really the answer. The answer is that you can control how you feel. You can control that I need to put my anger to positive usage as opposed to it consuming me, it controlling me.
Right. So you end up breaking that syndrome of being the victim.
Yes.
And you also break that syndrome of the ideal. What is the ideal father? Because we are bombarded with images of what the ideal family should look like. And I think this is another thing that comes up in the book. The ideal family, what it means to be part of a family, what it means to be a father. How do we defy those stereotypes? How do we defy those stereotypes? And I think it sounds what you did is one way of coming to a realization that there are some qualities that all people have and no one is perfect.
Yes, I think that even in the end of my story, and I tell how my father and I actually reconciled, I say that this is not a fairy tale. We didn't reconcile, and we are never going to have another issue. We're never going to have problems or disagreements or periods of uncomfortable moments. So it's an expectation of a perfect father is unrealistic because, we're not perfect. A parent, if he's been an absentee father and he comes into your life or he's not in your life often, you have to realize that you have to take the good with the bad and all because you're not bringing a perfect situation the relationship also. So I think it's a thing of patience and a thing to realize that there are no Brady Bunch families out there.
Okay, yeah, that's a reality. Just going back to one of the overriding themes is hip hop and the impact of hip hop on black men, on fatherhood. I'd like to hear from both of you and your thoughts of that and what ended up coming out in this book about the impact of hip hop on manhood and on defining manhood.
What I discovered, well, what was reaffirmed, I should say, is that a lot of men, either in themselves or they saw in other people, that hip hop did raise them, as they
Oh
said.
wow!
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
that
Yes.
they got codes of behavior,
Yes.
what quality relationships look like, how is loyalty manifest through through some aspect of hip hop, and if it wasn't them themselves, they could either identify with it in some way. So that was major. I don't think I had necessarily zoned in as specifically until I had these conversations, and it
That's
was
true.
major. Yeah, yeah.
Even the definition of what manhood is, uh, in some aspects, a good definition, and some aspects a negative definition. But you see some of the writers, in this book definitely took their definition of manhood in a positive aspect, and we have a few writers who actually talk about what certain songs meant to them,
Yes.
how that song changed their life and impacted in a positive way. Even the title of the book,
Yes.
"Be a Father to a Child," is a very, very well-known song by Ed O.G., I believe in 1991.
91.
That's a very powerful song, and it was a song that at that time in hip hop, wasn't necessarily a song that you would expect a rapper to necessarily put out. But that song has impacted people, and there are many other songs that have impacted young black men and young women also, but in a positive way, and they can remember that song or that time frame and what hip hop did for them.
Right. I mean, just to follow up on that, I see this book as one that could also be used in the schools.
Absolutely.
In the sense of them talking about hip hop really offering so many teachable moments.
Yes,
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 yes.
yeah. And Timothy Jones wrote the piece. He's a writer from D.C. who works with young people. He talked about specifically like this issue of loyalty and the code of behavior in crews. Like you had crews in hip hop. So he took models, not even just from the personal relationship side, to his own blended family. That he now has, but also from a business model. He talked about Wu-Tang and how that became, what hip hop looks like when it's matured. So you go from the street corner with your crew to the corporate office because hip hop
Yes.
came and exploded on the scene about how to do business
Yes,
differently.
yes.
So he brought all of that to say, and he's a minister in the church.
Okay.
He's a minister in the church, and he brought that to say, despite what you think hip hop is, let me tell you what we know it to be. As the children of it.
The complete story.
Yeah, exactly.
The complete story of hip hop,
Yeah.
which we so often don't get.
We don't get that story.
We don't get the complete
We don't
story.
get that story. He also, I don't know if it's this writer, but what was emphasized was even in terms of language and what the impact that hip hop has had on language, on one's ability to improvise. That's
Right.
very
Oh, that was Lasana.
challenging.
Yeah, I think that was Lasana. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and the freestyle, what your life looks like when you don't have that model family, like you said. You
Yeah.
got to freestyle and mix it up and, do those improvisational things, like, make something out of nothing, which is a common way that we describe, how we've overcome, this particular generation. So,
Now, one of the things that also I just don't think I realized the statistics where it's cited that 70% of African American children are born to parents who are not married.
Yeah. Yeah.
And 60% of black children are growing up without the fathers in the nuclear family, in the traditional household. So this book and the stories and what has happened has some real implications
Right.
Yeah.
for what's happening in our culture.
And
today.
the past 10, 15, 20 years, you've had, like we talk about in the introduction, policymakers, grant makers, social scientists look at these stats and say, okay, what's going on and how is this going to look? And we should pay attention. And what can we do, government, non-government, arts agencies, educational institutions, what can we do? Because we know that those stats are real human beings.
Yes.
And so you have someone like Lauren who, he's not even 40.
No, he's not 40. No.
This is what happens when you have a child of hip hop come in a decision-making entity and say, I know what these stats mean. Let's
from a personal aspect,
Exactly.
whether it's myself or my friendships.
And Lauren is
he did the introduction for the book.
Oh, yes, right.
Lauren
Yeah.
Harris.
Right.
Yes, this was his idea.
Yeah.
And so this is what it looks like when you have a hip hop head turned program officer.
Yes.
With these stats, you know,
Yes.
with these very
How do
real
I-
stats.
And I think he, one of the charges that he wanted was that our essays had a hip hop influence. And, you know, like they say, real talk. And one of the things that I did when I was writing was I was thinking about specifically one of the things that you said, that I think this book will serve well in church groups, in young men's groups, in a very teaching way, because young people are often not comfortable with their own feelings. However, if they read a story in, for example, in Timothy Jones, if he's teaching and he uses the book to have, you know, read a story, and then children can write essays on it about their own personal life
Right.
or how they felt about a story. So when I was writing my piece, I wanted it to be something that young people could relate to. And Lauren charged us all with that it have a hip-hop influence. One, because we are the first generation to actually grow up on hip-hop from from being little ones. Two, also relating to children who are and young people who are so heavily hip-hop influenced.
Mm-hmm. And I think it matters that at least 3 of the guys were fathers at 17.
Yes.
You know, so we have Mo Beasley
Yes,
to Beattie
yes.
Boone and Kevin Williams.
Yes.
Like there are some 16 and 17-year-olds living those lives, and you know, and our fathers themselves. And so that was important for us too, so that they could talk about the decisions they made, the impact, what it looks like, the challenges, and all of that.
And how they felt
Right.
about it.
Right.
Where can you get this book?
Everywhere.
Yeah.
It should be it is on your bookshelves. It just came out mid-June. And if it's not on your bookshelves at the Barnes and Nobles or Borders or Walden Books, then it's online. Sorry, barnesandnoble.com, amazon.com, borders.com. So it's everywhere books are sold.
Okay,
Yeah.
and you've been talking about it for a while. What kind of impact has it had?
Wow, I'm glad you asked that question. I was in North Carolina about 2 weeks ago. We had it was at a conference dealing with young people actually, and we've had correctional facilities come up to us. They've already placed or have pledged books. I don't think there's any state in the union that doesn't have a fatherhood program. So in talking about the book, then they're like, okay, we want to order these for the men in our mentoring programs or in our fatherhood programs, or the correctional facility in Dallas that's just ordered a hoard of books, you know, for their fatherhood program in the jails, you know, in that system there. So the people are being inspired. We have the state of Ohio on the verge of about to order books for their, you know, school-wide system. So so people are very grateful. And I find also that people in my mother's generation, they are very pleased to have this book because they did not know that men could be successful because of hip hop.
Yeah, that is really, really amazing. When we look about the future, what would you say from your perspective and from what you've seen here are the challenges as we come to a close? The challenges of being a father today and the challenges around defining manhood.
Well, I think but before I turn it over to Aaron, I think the challenges around fatherhood are as real as they ever were. I really think, and Lauren said this so much in his essay, before we talk about being fathers, then about being men, and then, quality, well-rounded, well-adjusted as much as humanly possible, human beings. And I think that's really at core of really what we're trying to get at. That's fundamental to everything in every relationship.
One of the challenges, I think, in a practical sense, or maybe not in an academic sense in terms of analysis, but many young men who are fathers weren't raised by their fathers. So they're figuring it out on their own. And I think that is one of the major challenges, because I do think that it does take, I think a man could do the best job raising a young man. And I think that when you're trying to figure out how to be a man yourself, because you weren't necessarily raised by your father, then, there's a certain amount of experimentation in raising your own child. I'm going to be 40 soon, and I still find myself trying to figure out issues of manhood, because I've learned, even though my father came into my life in my teenage years, the issues of me learning how to be a man, because we never lived in the same house, we're pretty much all on my own. And I was raised by wonderful women in my life, but the issues of learning how to be a man were on my own. So I think that one of the major challenges for a lot of young men who are raising children is that they're doing it the first time on their own without any experience from fathers or grandfathers or things of that nature.
Right. As you were talking, I was reminded of a statement that I think a couple of the writers made, that you really also have to think about family in a different way. You can't, because we have so many families that are not the traditional nuclear family,
Yes.
that you have to, it does really take a village, and you have to call on many
Absolutely.
people in the
Right.
community.
I think it's blended families now.
Blended
Yes.
families.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
blended families. You are going to have an opportunity. The listening audience will have an opportunity to hear some of the contributors to the book talk about the book and the impact of the book, and hear them tell their stories at an upcoming book signing.
Yes, we have Human. A couple of the authors will be at Human Bookstore in Harlem, and that's Thursday, July 10th from 6 to 8. We will have Byron Hurt, Mo Beasley, Sean Neblett, and Stephen Fullwood, and myself as on stage to discuss and sign. But some of the other contributors from the book will be there, as well, and support. But just some quick plugs. We'll also be in Cincinnati at the NAACP convention on the 14th and 15th of July. We'll be at Barnes & Noble in Rockland County on August 7th. And August 14th, we'll be in Brooklyn at the Barnes & Noble on Court Street. So that's just the beginning of our self-managed tour.
And they can also get more information at beafathertoyourchild.com.
Okay, would you repeat that?
Beafathertoyourchild.com.
Okay, so I want to thank you, April
Thank
and
you.
Aaron, for
Thank
coming.
you so much for having us.
This is
coming
great.
into the studios. And I want to encourage our listening audience to go out and purchase this book, support the work that April is doing, support our writers, reach out to all of the people you know, women as well as men. And remember, the writer is always reading, the reader is always writing. Empower yourselves as readers and writers. Keep reading and writing, and support writers. Please email me if you want to make comments, writers@mec.cuny.edu. That's writers@mec.cuny.edu. Again, thank you for tuning in, and come back next week. This is Brenda Greene, Writers on Writing, signing off.
Rivers I have seen and rivers I have known, ancient than the world